This is another harmful book that I would definitely recommend avoiding. I'm only bringing it up here so you can fortify yourself against friends and family that might have fallen down the rabbit hole. And you know, I think it was the New York Times. If you get a chance, I think this is behind a paywall, but I think it was the New York Times that said, "Don't go down don't fall down the rabbit hole. The danger of doing your own research," or something like that. And man, is that true. You know, when you start doing your own research, you know, that can lead people to a lot of wrong-headed ideas. So that's one of the reasons we have experts, and we have a lot of the pundits out there that help us understand a lot of events that are very complicated. There are people who spent decades in universities studying these things, and you and I are not going to understand the things the same way that, you know, the experts do. The people who've spent, you know, 10 years of their life studying political science are going to know these things better than we do. But I'm going to give you some tools for debunking material like this. This is the mysterious collapse of World Trade Center 7, why the final official report about 9/11 is unscientific and false, by David Ray Griffin. Excuse me. And this is from 2010. And this is all about this, a very thorough coverage of just the collapse of Building 7. And what the conspiracy theorists would have you believe is that World Trade Center 7 is kind of this giant elephant in the room with the whole 9/11 story about that according to the official narrative, as they say it, I would just say the narrative, because there really shouldn't be another one, but according to the narrative, on 9/11 at about 5 o'clock or so in the afternoon, World Trade Center 7, which is a 47-story skyscraper in the World Trade Center complex, kind of across the street, kind of catty corner to the main complex, that it collapsed into its own footprint that day. And that's held up as proof that there were controlled demolitions, because no plane hit the World Trade 7, and it was also called the Solomon Brothers Building, or the Solomon Building, or something like that. But it collapsed, and there's a lot of authors like David Ray Griffin who spent a lot of time digging into that and explaining, you know, the physics of how this couldn't fall into its own footprint and that sort of thing, and how this was obviously a controlled demolition. And this proves that there was foreknowledge, and that I've even heard people say that maybe Flight 93 was supposed to hit World Trade Center 7 and that sort of thing. And so they did, you know, knocked it down at the end of the day. There's even some old clips from the BBC where they talk about it collapsing and then it collapses behind them. I mean, a lot of coincidences are kind of exploited to support this theory. But Larry Silverstein, who owned the World Trade Center complex, put all of this to bed in an interview. I think it was around the anniversary of September 9/11 in 2002. And he was talking about how there had been such a horrible loss of life that day, and all this bad stuff was going on. And he told the fire department to pull it, and they pulled the building and demolished it. And so you have right there the owner of the World Trade Center complex, Larry Silverstein, coming right out and saying, because for safety issues, yes, it is a controlled demolition. Yes, we dropped it. He uses, you know, controlled demolition lingo of saying pull it. And they demolished the building in order to prevent further loss of life and further damage to surrounding buildings. And the conspiracy theorists get real hung up on that language of that. And they admit that, but they talk about, oh, well, there's no way they could have done that in that amount of time. That, you know, while the building's on fire, the idea that they could rig it for a controlled demolition is absurd. And that's where the conspiracy theorists, there's a lot of arrogance in their thinking, because they like to think they know everything. And that, you know, did you ever think maybe there's really brave firefighters and really brave demolition crews that would go into a burning building and rig it for demolition? There are heroes that do those things. And I have no problem with that at all, because that was one of those times where that was a very difficult decision to be made. And I can understand why a lot of people wouldn't want to talk about it, because that is a really tricky thing to navigate and do. But Larry Silverstein made that very difficult call, and he did that. Now, the anti-Semites would have you believe that Larry Silverstein is part of some bigger Zionist plot involving 9/11, and because I think he did like double the insurance money on the Trade Center complex after the buildings collapsed and all. He said it really qualified as 2 terrorist attacks and not just one, because one plane hit the North Tower, one plane hit the South Tower, so that was technically 2 separate attacks. And I think he actually got like double the money. So a lot of people use that to go after him. And I think that's really, this is a guy who was in a lot of pain, a lot of hurting about a lot of the stuff. In fact, I think he even narrowly escaped being at the Trade Center complex that day. So I think it's very anti-Semitic for people to say he had any kind of involvement or anything in that. This is just a guy who made the worst of a really bad situation. And by organizing the last-minute controlled demolition of World Trade Center 7, probably saved a whole lot of lives. Now, about the controlled demolition, it's funny. I mean, it's admitted. He admits it. But there's a lot of people don't really want to go with that because, again, some people think that just creates more problems. I think that just makes it case closed, done, end of story. But there are people who have problems with that, and I understand. It's kind of like give the conspiracy theorists an inch and they'll take a mile. So anyway, this is a dangerous, potentially anti-Semitic book, just because it really makes people rethink a lot of stuff, think a lot of bad stuff about Larry Silverstein that they shouldn't be thinking. So anyway, this is definitely, I would avoid this, but this is, again, the whole point of my channel here is to fortify you against family and friends that might wag this literature around at a family gathering or something and be like, yeah, this is, 9/11 is a false flag. And you can easily shut these people down with the equipment I'm going to provide for you on this channel. So I hope I can be helpful to that end, and thanks for watching.